Last week, I got the chance to hop on a digital roundtable with Leslye Headland. Eric Voss, Dimitri Beauchamp, Mesa Windu, and I all asked her questions about the Acolyte, mostly focused on Episode 7 and a little bit about what's to come in the finale. I'm going to run through some of the most interesting bits of information here at the top of the video, and then I'll play the audio recording in full at the end. First up, what was going on when Mother Aniseya and May started to turn into black smoke? Leslye said she wants that moment to be open to audience interpretation, but her own thought is that Mother Aniseya was trying to protect May by transforming them both into the Force, kinda like what Obi-Wan does in A New Hope, but without dying. I basically see it as the same thing the Night Sisters do, teleporting around, but their version of it looks like green flames instead of black smoke. What happened to Mother Koril? Leslye very openly said no body, no death, so I think she is clearly still alive and running around somewhere. Headland went on to say that the character will not appear in the finale episode, but if a second season happens, Koril's species is a clue as to where she might be headed. So, Iridonia! I'm just kidding, that's just one place Sabrax are from. I think Dathomir is the more likely answer here. We discussed the Wookiee fight scene a bit, and Leslye said that Jonas Swatamo did all of his own stunt work because nobody else could fit in the Wookiee suit. I just love that for him. I've been lucky enough to speak with him on multiple occasions here on our channel and at DragonCon, and he loved getting to do the action scenes as Chewbacca in Solo. I'm glad he got to swing a lightsaber around and use the Force. I bet he had a blast. Should Kelnaka be considered a Mad Claw? In Wookiee culture, using your claws for attack is a big no-no. Kelnaka scratches up Torbin's face, but he wasn't under control of his own body, so does he get a pass? Leslye says she thinks he should, but Kelnaka probably didn't forgive himself, which is part of the reason he went off into isolation. Did Indara actually contact the Council? Some fans have wondered that since the fact that Osha had a twin wasn't in her file. Leslye wasn't specifically asked this, but she did mention Indara's conversations with the Council and her attempts to do things by the book. I would guess the twin thing was removed from Osha's file because the Jedi might not have wanted any hint of her manipulated creation to get out into the galaxy. I'm not sure of the answer here, but I do believe Indara spoke to the Council and was being truthful to Sol. Was there a previous civilization on Brendok? We at least know there was an abandoned mining facility, which is where the Coven took up residence. Leslye Headland says that her current thought is that the miners delved too greedily and too deep, discovering the Vergence and the Force, and then, like in the movie The Thing, the Vergence began to corrupt everyone one by one until they all turned on one another. When asked if there were any deep-cut Easter eggs or references fans haven't caught yet, Headland said that she hasn't been able to keep up with the response to the show, so she doesn't know the answer, but she also said that the main thing she wanted to include would be in the final episode, so tomorrow we should have something big to chew on. Near the end, I asked about Leslie's time playing Star Wars TTRPG games and how it impacted her as a storyteller. As someone who plays D&D myself, I enjoyed her answer, but the best little Star Wars nugget she provided here was that Yord Fandar was a character in one of her campaigns. I don't know if she means just the name or the character traits of a try-hard Jedi or both, but regardless, Yord was inspired by a TTRPG game, and I just think that's neat. Okay, now I'm going to play the full recorded audio. At first, it's Leslye answering our questions asked through a moderator, then she answers a few questions in chat, and then we each ask one over audio. The audio is a little spotty and drops in and out a bit, but it's mostly audible, just a heads up there.
Well, hello everyone, and excited for you to join us for today's roundtable discussion with Leslye Headland, who served as writer, director, showrunner, and executive producer for The Acolyte. Today's conversation will focus on episode 7, and thank you all for submitting questions in advance. Leslye, I'll do a quick intro of everyone who is here. Today we're joined by Eric Voss, Alex Damon, Dimitri Beauchamp, Joshua Jackson, and Jeff Chaco. So we can begin. Our first question is from Eric Voss, and did the Great Hyperspace Disaster destroy a civilization that previously existed on the planet Brendok? Will we learn what that civilization was?
It's an excellent question. It's meant to be a bit mysterious. I can tell you what my opinion is, which is I think that the disaster oddly didn't touch the planet, which is why they're there. They're essentially confused as to this planet was categorized as formidable, and yet there is life here. Vegetation is growing. There are birds. There are animals. or alien butterflies. So clearly it's not lifeless, and therefore they need to go and gather all of the information that they can. So it's actually the opposite is what there is. There shouldn't be anyone here. Why is there the evidence of healthy planet? There is, though, the added element that there isn't a civilization here anymore. When Torbin says that the Coven's domicile is an old mining facility that's been abandoned, including the generator that they find, and all of those other things. It's my belief that it's actually the vergence on the planet that has destroyed that civilization or caused that civilization to migrate. Meaning, if I were to explore it further, it's a little bit like John Carpenter's The Thing. There was all these miners there, everybody's working, they hit something, and suddenly everybody's gone. So they're looking for a vergence for the main reason, which is that would explain why this planet survived this. But what I think they don't understand is that that might also be the reason why it's no longer inhabited by its previous civilization.
Next question is from Alex Damon. When Mother Aniseya was turned into black smoke, the same happened to May. What was the power, and how does it relate to their connection?
Again, I would love to leave it up to interpretation, but because you're asking me, I'll give you my personal spin on it, which is that I believe when Jackie says in episode 4, where we're talking about the Umber Moths, that it's an honor to see anyone or anything transform into the Force, which is usually connected to being separated from their corporal form and transforming into the Force. I think what Aniseya is attempting to do is to do that while keeping herself and May alive. She's trying to become part of the Force with her daughter. I do think personally it is a dangerous power. There is no, I don't think Soul is wrong to be concerned. It's a power he's never seen before. It's a power which the result of could work or not work. It's similar to her creation of the twins. The twins, I don't think were ever meant to be twins. I think they were meant to be one person, and that power did not work exactly the way it was supposed to. So, or intended to, I should say, by its wielder. So I believe that's what Aniseya feels is the best thing for her and her child in that moment. But I also think it's pretty risky, as the only time we see characters in Star Wars ever doing that, like Yoda, it is at the death of their corporal body.
All right, and the next question is from Dimitri Beauchamp. I love that we got to see more of Carrie-Anne Moss as Indara. After breaking the link the witches had on Pilnaka, it's obvious that she is a very powerful Jedi. Personally, where do you think she ranks in terms of Jedi that we see?
I think she's extremely high. I wouldn't say that she's as high as Vernestra, Yoda, a lot of the Jedi that we see in the prequels that are not human species who can live longer. I think those automatically would be stronger masters. But I think for a human Jedi, she's pretty high up there. But yeah, wouldn't surpass masters that we know who have much longer lifespan, or Jedi with some sort of manipulative birth, like an Anakin. Like.
So the next one, you are clearly a massive Star Wars lore fan, as the show had so many deep cuts. Is there any deep cuts that no one seemed to notice yet? And was there anything you pushed for that didn't make the cut?
It's a great question. I haven't been following the response to the show well enough to know what people have missed. I was very glad that people, from what I heard, immediately latched on to Barash Vow, Cortosis, hyperspace disasters, like all of the Easter eggs, for lack of a better term. It seemed like people were responding to them based on the information that I was getting. Trying to think if there was something that I didn't get to do. I mean, my main thing that I really wanted to do in the show, I got to do in episode 8, and that was the one that I think was the biggest challenge in conversation. And I was very glad I got to do them. But I can't speak to what people didn't notice. Maybe you guys can tell me what you noticed and other people didn't.
You can throw that in the chat if you guys have any thoughts.
Oh, Alex, yeah, the Vernestra. I know it's funny because I just thought, again, like, you know, it's such a that Vernestra's hyperspace sensitivity was something that I thought was so beautifully done in the books and just so cool. And the idea that when she's like an older woman, everyone's like, "You're gonna get, you know, you gonna get car sick," and she's like, "These fucking people." I love that Vernestra's full attitude in 6 is what the actual thought. Like, did anyone come to work prepared today? You know, so but I loved that little nod to that, and obviously when you see her on Kopar, you see, you know, what we all know, which is that she's gifted this particular vision because of traveling through hyperspace. You'll see it again in episode 8. But it is kind of comical because when I put it into the script, there were some people at the company that didn't understand what I was saying. I was like, "Don't worry about it. It's like an inside joke, you guys. It's fine."
But the next one is from Joshua Jackson. Fun one here. The choreography in the fight scene sequences were a lot of fun. Everyone did great, but how much fun was it on set watching a giant Wookiee with a lightsaber chase everyone?
I basically was not on set that day. One of the great regrets of my life. That sequence was directed by Koganada and by the episode director, as well as the second unit director, Chris Cowan, who is also our action choreographer. And both of them said, "Thank you so much for gifting this to us." I know they all had a blast, and Jonas especially, I think, was very excited to do both his stunt work and his fighting, because no one else could fit in the suit, so it had to be Jonas and no stunt double. Yes, so yes, absolutely. Bravo, Alex, that you noticed that. This absolutely, you know, when I was going through the blind spots, obviously Kelnaka didn't do anything wrong. Kelnaka is the only Jedi that was completely, you know, in my opinion, blameless in this situation. However, because of his community that he comes from his upbringing, his world, just the fact that he hurt for him to seek seclusion and to learn his lesson. So I think he could get a pass, and I think he thinks he should as well, or Indara or Soul convinced him that he did. But so technically, I think he deserves a pass, but I think he didn't give him.
And next question is from Dimitri. I have a friend who, throughout the Acolyte, has described the Jedi as the ops or enemy. And in episodes 3 and now 7, we really see how they try to impose the will of the Jedi. Moving forward, do you think the view of the Jedi will become more askew?
That's a great question. I would say, again, it's very much left to interpretation. If that's what you and your friend got from it, I'm very, very happy. I think my opinion is, I probably wouldn't use the term impose. I would use the term blind spot, which, as we know, George brings it all the way to its logical conclusion in episodes 1 through 3. So I was just working from backwards from what he did, and created. And I think that the literal blind spot of Palpatine, but then also the blind spot of being unable to have the foresight to see that while they can see that training Anakin is dangerous, they don't really see to what extent that could be. So I would say that the Jedi are operating from a blind spot there. Torbin is definitely suffering from a relatable blind spot. Just any person that's ever been an 18-year-old who's on a camping trip they don't want to be on, like, just, you know, is struggling with, if I don't know the end point, then how am I supposed to be patient? And that's sort of a totally relatable thing. I think Souls is an emotional blind spot. He just, you know, has this feeling that Qui-Gon had with Anakin. He just feels for this connection to Osha. He feels that that paternal protectivism coming up and acts on it and feels that that is the will of the Force for him. But like I said, has the emotional blind spot of not being able to tell that that's not what was supposed to happen, or maybe it was, if you believe in sort of a fatalism of like everything leading to exactly where it's supposed to be. And I think Indara just has an institutional blind spot. You know, she's very respectful of the other culture. She knows the steps that she should go through in talking to the council, and kind of over and over again, you know, is attempting to slow down the process of investigating this. But at the same time, she is not really tapping into the emotional intelligence of the appeal to soul, and she's not sort of clocking how disturbed um, Torbin is.
So Torbin clearly took the events on Brendok particularly hard, considering he was the only one to go as far as to take a vow of silence for years until he willingly allowed himself to be poisoned. It seems to have eaten away at him despite his advancement throughout the ranks of the Jedi. What is some insight you could give regarding Torbin's guilt and state of mind?
I think it's the worst kind of guilt, which is guilt over mistakes made at a young age. I think May is suffering from that a little bit. Osha's suffering from that a little bit. I think those might be the mistakes that haunt you the most, because you were too young to know any different. And even if you did know different, you were still acting out of understandably, your brain's not fully formed place. Those are harder ones to make amends for. And if they had all decided to, you know, keep this secret both for for Osha, then it's asking them to hold something very painful and powerful, which Sol and Indara have in weird ways made peace with somehow. Sol even says that in episode 2, I've made peace with what happened on Brendok, and JJ's performance is perfect because it's very clear he hasn't. Like, he's convinced himself that he has. And I think Torbin never did. I think he felt torn in two directions, that it was his duty to keep this secret because he said he would, and if he was going to do anything after the mistakes he made in 107, it was going to be to, I would say his state of mind is just trapped, which I think is a really good, again, thematically, I thought it was really cool that he's literally trapped inside his mind.
And the next question is from Eric. Did the writers talk about whether the poisonous blue outgrowth on the Bunta tree was a fruit, part of the tree itself, or a fungus, a separate organism from the tree? And how might that reframe how we should look at the moral balance of the planet of Brendok?
Oh, that's interesting. We didn't differentiate that. We saw the leaves as poisonous as opposed to those blue little mushrooms. We figured that the plant in and of itself was a poisonous plant that was beautiful. So I think in terms of the balance that you're describing, like, that is very thematically, I think, how Brendok is, which is like lush, beautiful, easy on the eyes, but ultimately there is something dangerous going on. And it's true for both factions as well. The Jedi, you know, guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy, but also super flawed. You know, the witches, the coven, trying to find their little piece of heaven on earth, and yet at the same time wielding power that maybe Aniseya has a lot of confidence in her ability to control and manipulate, but the rest of her followers, Koril, you know, specifically, and the other witches possessing Kelnaka do not have the same kind of grasp on. So.
Another one from Alex Damon. We didn't see Mother Koril in the aftermath of the attack. So where is she?
So nobody, no death for sure. We won't see any more of Koril. We won't see her in episode 8 if we, you know, are lucky enough to continue telling the story. I'd say her species sort of gives you a clue as to where she ends up.
If anyone has any other questions, feel free to throw them in the chat and I will call on you, or raise your hand. Eric asked a question. Will we learn what the Brendok mining facility was mining? Was it Cortosis?
No, it won't be Cortosis. We want to keep Cortosis as rare as humanly possible. That was one of the agreements on its inclusion, was that it be an unstable metal, meaning it wouldn't withstand an entire battle, and also that getting it would be extremely difficult. You would have to go to an uncharted, unknown planet in order to get it. So jury's still out on what they were mining for. Lack of communication and trust. on that fence. It feels like unless I'm expecting a different culture from our own, what is the fatal flaw here? I think the fatal flaw is always like with any any sort of good strategies, everybody thinking they're the good guy, everybody thinking that they're right. In episode 1, the stranger says the Jedi live in a dream they believe everyone shares. I mean, the Jedi's real fault here is everyone shares the same dream that we have, and I think in our culture it's the same thing. You know, people really believe the dreams they believe. They believe that the dream is worth um, fighting for, and any collateral that may come along with it because of how beautiful that is. But the truth is, the dream is not, actions can't be justified by that particular ideal. Nobody ever lives up to an ideal, a dream. There might be some historical figures that have been able to do that, to transcend, again, that they could follow the tenets of Buddhism to the point where they are practicing complete unattachment. But I think even those people would say, I'm still attached. The reason I'm doing this is because uh, it's like that. I don't know how true it is, but it's that quote that's attributed to Mother Teresa when they ask, like, how do you do this? How do you do this? And she's like, because otherwise I'm so uncomfortable in my own body. I mean, I'm in her 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 drive to do good was not an end in of itself. It was a daily practice that relieved her from the negative feelings and emotions that she was having. So I think even people that do reach the quote dream, they're still, the only reason they're there is because they acknowledge that the dream is impossible.
Sorry, just unmuting myself there. Sorry, I have so many questions about Cortosis because I love that
You can ask.
got
It
in
doesn't
here.
have to just be. Yeah. It doesn't have to be just 7 if you guys, since we covered it.
So cool. I had an idea that maybe Cortosis could be established as like an anti-kyber crystal. Is the Cortosis meant to just react with the kyber crystal, or is it like any type of weaponry used as a weapon, for example?
That's a good question. I think it's lightsaber specific, but I don't know if that would be the best use of it narratively. Like my personal belief is that Cortosis is its main, beyond being an armor and being a metal. I think the main reason that particular people in this story would want it is because of its resistance to the lightsaber. But whether it had more mythology around it is something that isn't explored in this season, but I think is absolutely worth exploring. Because Beskar has a lot of other things, especially even culturally, that it's meanings, like cultural meanings, not just handy against lightsaber. I'm sure there's a lot there.
I guess I have just an overall question. I know that you have a big background in the tabletop role-playing game, doing stories through that. So how do you feel like that's impacted you as a storyteller? Because that's such a fun, collaborative way to tell stories. Did it impact the Acolyte at all?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it absolutely is a great exercise as a storyteller, because it as you're playing, you have to run scenarios, which is really what a writer's room is you have a pitch, but then you have to run all the scenarios of like, how long does that pitch work for? And then of course, when you're writing, you do have to make a couple decisions of just like, okay, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to roll on X and see how it plays out for the rest of the script or episode. And then, what's lovely about writing as opposed to a campaign is that you can go back and you can adjust things, sort of make it a little smoother than actually a playthrough or a campaign would be. With the Acolyte, I've said this before, but Jord Bandar was a character that was in our campaign when I was writing in COVID, and I just thought it would be funny to put him in this show, mostly as a nod to my friends. I would say a lot of the, let's say most of the stuff that came out of it was like 2.5 campaigns that we did over the course of the years that I worked on this. it was the locations and trying to, we had to create a lot of planets instead of utilizing planets that had already been established. So as we did more, as we went to more and more places, even though in our campaigns they were, canon planets, it was fun to, as it's like, well, what am I looking at? Like, what do I see? And so like Apothecary came out of that, like my DM would run situations that felt quote Star Warsy, but weren't specific to like we're on this planet and this thing's happening, like a cantina, but this. Answer your question. It was very environmental, I guess. It's like playing around in those worlds and having to think of what they looked like, really.
I just had one other question. It's very interesting. I think Torbin is a very interesting character. And you explained it. He's this 18-year-old who just wants to like he doesn't want to be on this trip, and I love that. That's the way you explained it because like I think we've all been in that situation. But when we first saw the flashbacks in episode 3 with him just being controlled, we didn't really know what was going on in his mind. And then in episode 7, we see that Aniseya was like actually manipulating him in that way. So one of my other questions was that do you think that because of how his demeanor was and throughout the whole episode and like his action, his mindset, like would he be more susceptible to the dark side?
Oh, well, yes. I mean, the selfishness of I want to go home, for sure is, Indara is trying to teach him to wrestle with that himself. He says to Soul, you can't tell them, otherwise they don't learn it. So part of it was this, well-meaning, okay, he's going through this thing, but we can't just tell him stop doing it. He has to learn for himself that this is not a path he can go down, but how do you learn? By making mistakes. And these mistakes had really huge repercussions. So I don't think anybody sort of foresaw how much that of that lesson, how much that lesson was going to affect their surroundings and their futures. I just don't think, I mean, I guess you can say that Jedi are all-knowing, all-seeing beings that would have been able to be playing fourth dimensional chess about, I just don't think that's the case. I think they were, again, Indara from her, institutional blind spot, it's like, this is how you learn, this is what you do. Not necessarily picking up on how the Torbin was after what had happened to him. I think, again, Aniseya, while being an incredibly powerful being, doesn't necessarily know the extent of how her powers are going to work within certain structures, meaning, she wants to create life, but life ends up splitting, she wants to remove her child from a situation, but she's doing it in a way that's just unknowable. Like, I doubt it's something that she had been practicing with the girls. It just seems too knee-jerky for that to be the case. And I think when she goes inside Torbin's mind, it's something she's done before. But as Osha says in episode 5, she says, I saw my mother do that once. So this is probably the first Jedi she's encountered. So she uses the power that she knows works on enemies, but doesn't know how it's going to affect a Jedi. And I think it kind of spins him out a little bit more than if she hadn't done it.
Hi, thank you for taking letting me onto this. First of all, I appreciate it. Thank you, Leslye. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I guess my last question, and I realize this might be something you might not be allowed to say. So if you don't want to, that's fine. But I thought it was really awesome that and interesting that you made the true, I'm assuming, telling of what happened on Brendok, the penultimate episode of the series. I thought that was really interesting, and I feel like it was for a reason that we get the actual truth, and then we go into the finale. I know you can't say too much, and I don't want to get you into trouble or anything like that, but now that we know the truth, apparently, of what really went down, what can we expect broadly for the finale and potentially beyond?
Well, yes, it was the show was structured, as we've said many times, as a mystery thriller. There were, kind of 3 big mysteries, which is why is May killing Jedi, who is May's master, and then what actually happened on Brendok. So we wanted each of those things to start being met out instead of over the course of the season instead of us finding out all three of them at the end. So the idea was to start answering each one kind of hopefully a little earlier than you were expecting it to, meaning, you find out in 3, oh, May doesn't like these Jedi. We don't know exactly why, but we understand from her perspective, they took her sister and invaded their home. So that's why she's hunting them. By the end of 4, all of those Jedi besides Soul are dead. So that's been resolved. Then, the master comes, the stranger comes in. We're wondering who it is. I mean, we all know it's Kiner, but we all know it's Manny. But the excitement is like, well, what's everyone going to do when it's Manny, and what's Manny going to do when it happens? It was very funny not watching because I wasn't in people's houses, but I did see a couple of like Darth Bortles jabs like going around like before the show came out, and I was like, let me get some nice chairs so you're comfortable when you sit the fuck down. Like, it's just what the stranger was going to bring was something that I was like, that's going to be a nice surprise for the viewers and rewarding them for them to watch. And then the 7th episode, an ultimate episode, was always meant to answer the real big question, which is what actually happened and how culpable were the Jedi in it, and how culpable were the witches and the and hopefully with 7, you understand that like basically all the institutions failed the children, and that those children then went out into the world with their 2 differing ideologies, the only 2 that they know, Jedi and witches. And then May assuming that like witches were almost dark side Sith adjacent. I don't even know if she knew she was working for a Sith, to be quite honest. I think May was just like, I gotta get strong enough to take these out. Gosh, I didn't answer your question. Sorry, I was just talking about the structure of the show and why it was meted out that way. But you asked about the finale and how that.
Yeah, just broadly, what do you think we can expect for the finale and potentially beyond?
Okay, sorry, this is what I was getting at, was that the penultimate, with all of those little, I don't want to say red herrings, but all those little mini mysteries, the big mystery is that gets solved in 7 is the betrayal of the father, which is the hugest. I mean, it's practically what Star Wars is about. One might think, Luke, I'm your father, is the thing that takes it from a groundbreaking fairy tale with astonishing new heights of visual and emotional storytelling into a place that is so typically shocking, that it just cements into your brain and imprints itself there in a way that is personal to probably every single human that watches it, because every single human can understand to some extent the betrayal of the father. So Luke deals with that in the way that he deals with it in Return of the Jedi. He is a Jedi like my father before me, and makes his decisions about that betrayal, and the repercussions and conclusions of that are, the stuff of history. In our show, we have a character that's going to find out about the betrayal of the father, and we're going to see how she deals with it. A little bit of a long answer, but because you asked, it was kind of easier to go through the whole thing.
Oh, totally fine with that. Perfect. Thank you.
My brain works. Yeah. No, thank you, Josh.
And that's the end of the roundtable. Hopefully you enjoyed that and it got you ready to watch the finale tomorrow. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on our socials, and consider checking out our Patreon page. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.